Prepare to be captivated by the business story of the week, hosted by me, Shaheen Shan. Join us on a journey through the twists and turns of entrepreneurial triumphs and setbacks. Immerse yourself in the narrative and witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. This is Business Story of the Week.
And welcome back, folks. Welcome back to Business Story of the Week. I am your host, Joshua. And today I'd like to ask a question. What is a lower middle market? And what does it mean for market growth and equity investments? Well, today our guest is exactly the expert to answer that question. But more than that, he is an incredibly successful entrepreneur that doesn't even do him justice, really. He's had three massively successful exits and a trusted advisor to large equity firms today. He joins us. Eric Vest is the founder and managing partner of Y Capital Partners, specializing in lower middle market growth equity investments, which we are going to talk about today. Since 2021, Mr. Vest has been a special advisor to several large private equity firms. In particular, he helps teams understand how the utilization of large language models will revolutionize large molecule drug discovery. Very interesting stuff. And how AI will be instrumental in increasing the cost and time of creating new drugs. These groups rely on Eric's unique skill set that combines decades of operating experience, a deep understanding of capital markets, and the ability to see and catalyze new stages of value. I am very excited to talk about these stuff right now. Eric, thank you for coming on here to the show. How are you doing?
Of course, Joshua. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Fantastic, Eric. I know it is an early time for you, so I really appreciate you coming on here. But allow me to run this through just really quick. In 1995, you were scaling Vast Technologies or Vest Technologies in e-commerce company and sold that to a private investor 2001. You were also you sold Interface to Thermo Scientific in 2004. And prior to your third acquisition is actually Blue Lab Consulting, which is an LIMS integration consultancy. These are your three massively successful exits. But Eric, before we even get into this, did you always know you were going to get into investment, equity investment, so to speak? What is the story of Eric Vest? When you were a child, did you always know you were going to get into this?
The quick answer is absolutely not. I grew up in a small farm town in central Ohio, a town called London, between Columbus and Dayton, Ohio. And the idea of high finance, the field of high finance, really never touched where I grew up. And I think a lot of rural places, most people have no idea about venture capital or private equity or alternative investments or anything like that. You know, you're either trading grain or you're trading on the public markets. It's one of the two things. And so
You're trading grain, not trading brain.
I think that not trading brain. But when I went away to school, I was thinking that I was going to be a double major in economics and Japanese. Coming out of the 80s when the Japanese were buying up everything. And Honda had just built a big plant outside of Columbus. And a lot of the people whom I knew ended up working there. So that wasn't the path for me. You know, I was very much looking forward to going to college. I grew up in the type of place where probably less than half of my graduating class would actually go on to college. Right. And my father worked in a steel plant. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, to a large degree. And they actually met in the Marine Corps, if you can believe that. My parents met at Camp Pendleton,
wow,
which is just crazy. And so when I went away to college, I had a very interesting experience. I had one elective my freshman year, and for whatever reason, I've always loved the Middle Ages, and so I took a course on Chaucer. just to give my brain a rest from the econ, which was super cutthroat. I went to Penn, so it was all the working
Right.
kids in econ 101, so it was super competitive. And then the Japanese was fascinating, but it was incredibly intensive. And it was fine. I really enjoyed it, but it was incredibly difficult to learn
Of course.
from a Westerner. Actually, the Japanese was fine. Japanese is phonetic, but it's learning all of the Chinese kanji, all the Chinese characters that was so difficult. But I really got to know the professor from that Chaucer class, and he had told me to not treat my college experience like a trade school.
Right.
He said, just study what you love. You're never going to get 4 years again like this in your entire life. And so study what you love and do well. But just don't treat it like a trade school, because you're going to be changing careers multiple times in your life, and you're just never going to get 4 years like this again. So I changed my degree to medieval literature and joined a fraternity and had the time of my life and did well. But all the time that I was doing that, I knew that I wanted to. I'd always had an attraction for technology, and like when I was in high school, I had a Tandy 3000 from Radio Shack, and I would try to program and play computer games, like really super early days. But I couldn't handle the programming. I just didn't have the attention to detail for it. I was always, it's one of those things where you don't, as you grow older, you sort of learn what your superpowers are. Like, what is it that you're really good at? What are you weak at? And attention to detail, as I found over the years, was just something that I always had a difficult time doing it. So programming was not for me. So I really kind of went into the business of technology.
That's not basically that wasn't your strong suit. Medieval history was your strong suit, perhaps, because you enjoyed it so much, and you chose that to be the direction that you take. I love the advice that your professor gave you. I think we could do a lot of good in our lives personally, enrich it, if we approach it that way, or we approach studies that way. Because so much so it's treated like a trade school, like whatever your career is going to be, that's supposed to be what you're going to take here on the university. But it changes. It really does. All your opportunities come along. It all changes. And you, in your particular case, went from medieval history and into technology. And speaking of technology, Eric, you are spearheading, you are a big advisor for equity firms right now who are leading this space in AI and drug discovery. How did you get into this space, and what what advancements do you foresee in this space, and how do you think they will impact healthcare and biotech in the future?
Well, I got into the space sort of by happenstance. I had my first company in San Francisco that was an e-commerce company. During that time, a guy whom I had met and become close friends with when I was in Philadelphia. So after a year after school, I worked for a professor. During that time, I met this English guy who was working for a French company, and just happened to work in the same office suite. I go away to San Francisco. He goes back to France. The company that Catalyst was being bought by a company called Ares Sirona, which is a big Swiss pharmaceutical conglomerate. Used to be. They were bought by Merck. And after a couple of years, he and I had stayed in touch. He says, "Hey, I think Ares Sirona would like to offload the company. Would you like? I love what you guys are doing at Vest Technologies, because we were really bleeding edge. It's like first gen JavaScript. We were Netscape partner, the whole works." And so he and I and a couple of other guys carved the company out of Ares Sirona and partnered on the technology side. And we tried to raise capital in France, which was a bit of a black comedy. An Englishman, it's like a joke. An Englishman and an American try to raise money in Paris in the 90s. And so we end up bringing the company to the United States, back to Philadelphia, where he and I met. And come 2001, when the industry imploded, I appreciate the accolades, but we were high flying, but we fell pretty hard with the rest of the industry. Wow. So I sold the company in a fire sale to a company called Razorfish that many people might remember. Okay. And then moved back to Philadelphia and ran corporate development. And the reason why that's sort of important is because that is what gave me my first taste of the capital markets. So running Corp Dev, I was working alongside of our capital partners and working on our tuck-ins. A tuck-in is effectively the name for a small acquisition that you're just sort of tucking into your company. Yes. So we raised 4 rounds of venture capital and private equity from the local suspects in the Philadelphia ecosystem, and bought several companies, and then we had a nice exit in 2004 to another big American conglomerate called Thermo. Okay. I took some time off after that, and then started another company in the space. So that company was all really focused on pharmaceutical R&D. Yes. So there's a very esoteric aspect of it called bioanalysis, and that's when you're effectively testing to see exactly what a drug is doing. Yes. So you hypothesize what a drug's going to do. That's discovery. Then you test it on animals. It's called preclinical. That's the euphemism for it. And then you're doing all of the science to see what exactly the drug was doing. And so this software company specialized in the middle part on the bioanalysis. And then you got into LIMS, the Laboratory Information Management System, which is more on the QC laboratory for manufacturing. And that's what Labware was. So I ended up spending like 25 years in that space, in and around sort of pharmaceutical R&D, pharmaceutical manufacturing, and manufacturing in general, including clinical trials. And what happened was, being the number 2 at the global market leader, private equity came a knocking, and Francisco Partners sort of called me up after they announced the purchase of a company that I had actually recommended to them that they do, in addition to some other groups, which is a company called StarLimbs. And when they made that announcement, they asked if I'd like to come help. And that's what served as the catalyst for me to sort of move into an advisory role in private equity. Right. What you've got going on in terms of the application of the technology, the effect that it's going to have is going to be really profound. And I also did a 4th company. I was a co-founder of an AI company that was focused on hiring and employment in the healthcare sector. So that's what sort of gave me a very in-depth knowledge of artificial intelligence, computational artificial intelligence, not large language models, which is what everyone hears about now. But when you think about the application of those technologies to what is going on today when it comes to the creation of new drugs, the impact is just unbelievable. So you have, to oversimplify, you have small molecules, which is like your Tylenol, and then you have large molecules, which is like the COVID vaccine. Right. And large molecules are exponentially more complex than small molecules, to the point where, and they're based on proteins and amino acids. And just best way to put it is exponential complexity over a small molecule, which is just a chemical structure. The application of large language model, artificial intelligence, to the design of new large molecule drugs it's really the only way, because the complexity is so high. To do it manually, to design a new large molecule drug is super, super hard for human beings to do it. So when you have large language models being applied to the creation of new drugs, you're going to be able to do it much faster, much better, much more accurately. Then you move into computational artificial intelligence as it applies to the anticipation of what that drug is going to do on a living organism. That's called biosimulation. And that is the effect of there is that it's going to dramatically decrease the amount of effort and time and cost for conducting clinical trials. So instead of doing a 5,000 patients for a clinical trial, you'll be able to do it with 50 or 500 because your computations, your biosimulation is accurate enough to say, okay, well, we know in a computer model, we're able to anticipate to a high degree of accuracy what is going to transpire. And that's going to make things much faster and much cheaper as well.
That is mind blowing, Eric, and it truly is profound. You did not over exaggerate when you said the effects or the findings are going to be profound. We are essentially creating a simulation, like you said, biosimulation to test these new drugs and creating the same kind of massive kind of technology to create these new drugs. It's fascinating, Eric, and I. We are really entering a new frontier, aren't we?
Yeah, it's going to be a sea change when it comes to drug development. And the piece that's going to, so AI is going to make is going to make designing drugs more faster, cheaper, better. And it's going to make anticipating what it's going to do faster, cheaper, better. And then what you're really starting to see with wearables and ingestibles,
Of course.
is creating the feedback loop finally. Because right now the world of healthcare is kind of a black box to the pharmaceutical industry. And so what transpires when your doctor prescribes a drug, what happens with you at home as you're taking the drug, it very infrequently gets back to your doctor, let alone the drug maker. So what's going to happen is once the feedback loop is complete, where your wearables and your ingestibles are going to provide performance data, field performance data for a drug back to the manufacturer, then you're going to start getting to the point where you're really finally reaching the point where you can do precision medicine. So something as simple as, imagine everyone's got an Apple Watch on and everyone's taking something like Tylenol, right? So acetaminophen. So everyone's taking Tylenol. Based on that feedback loop, it's feasible that you could have different demographic groups having their own different styles of Tylenol that are more efficacious for them. So older women have different biologies than a 9-year-old boy. And yet we're giving them the exact same drug. But once we create that feedback loop and we can create drugs faster, cheaper, better, then we're at the point where the ability to be incredibly accurate with the drugs themselves is going to have a huge impact on
Wow,
life.
it's almost like it's unimaginable what kind of future that looks like because it's something that we have not experienced yet, and the pace, at the size or the quantity that this is scaling to is truly profound. And Eric, I'm very excited for that. I want to ask about now your lower middle market growth. And this is you are spearheading, or you are the founder and managing partner for Y Capital Partners. And this is a fruit of your labors. It is a result of your extensive experience in the capital market. But talk to us a little bit about what lower middle market is and why have you chosen for this particular market to be your focus?
So most of my work, when I stepped away in 2021, the vast majority of my work was with M&A. So it was with large groups like Francisco Partners and Warburg Pincus and 3i and Charles Bank and a bunch of others that were doing buyouts. I've quickly found that my only viable career path in that world was as an operating partner. And I wasn't a big fan of the way that operating partners. I didn't appreciate the dynamic of the way that operating partners worked with the guys who were in the GP, what it's called. So the guys who were the people who were in the private equity firm used operating partners as resources, and they really weren't in very many cases, they weren't really treated terribly well, in my opinion. So I didn't want to go down that
Mhm.
path. And so what I kind of came to the realization of was that I was being I was being asked to provide advice on pretty much all aspects the of the
Right.
deal. So from industry mapping to thesis development to
Of course.
diligence to value
Mhm. Mhm.
creation, it was they were relying on me for everything, and I kind of had an epiphany where I realized that the private equity industry is actually upside down.
Huh.
It's a bunch of finance guys who periodically use operators. And
Okay.
I think it should primarily be operators who periodically use finance
Of
guys.
course.
And so, because at the end of the day, it comes down to like, yeah, you've got to do the blocking and tackling. You've got to have a discounted
Mhm.
cash flow run. You've got to have an accurate
Mhm.
valuation and modeling,
Mhm.
all that good stuff. But you can outsource that. Like the real value of private equity and venture also to a
Mhm.
degree is um, it comes down to the being able to spot how you can create value with a
Wow.
company. And that is what someone with tons of operating and entrepreneurial experience can do much more effectively than someone who's just been in
Mhm.
finance
Mhm.
for many, many
Right.
years. My opinion. I'm sure that there are people who would argue
Of course.
vehemently
Mhm.
about that.
Mhm.
But so while I was over the past 10 years, I've been very, very involved in an organization that changed my life. And it's called Young Presidents Organization, YPO. And YPO is a global organization of about 34,000 CEOs around the
Uh-huh.
world. And the criteria to qualify for the organization are pretty steep.
Right.
You've got to be making, I think the base is you've got to be making at least, you've got to be running at least a $15 million
Okay.
company. And in some cities, it's much, much more
Mhm.
than that. Like joining YPO in New York City, you've got to be making three times, your company has to be three times the
Of
size
course.
of that. So I love the organization. It's truly the first peer group that I have come to enjoy and
Mhm.
embraced, and I just really felt like I found my
Wow.
tribe. You know, it's like it's just an incredible group of people who are focused on growth in their businesses and growth as leaders and growth as human
Right.
beings.
Right.
And everything about the organization really resonated with me. But I found that the majority of the operators that I had encountered over the years go outside of YPO for
Of
capital.
course.
And I just thought it was kind of crazy because when I looked back over my career, I would have jumped at the opportunity to have had a fellow YPOer on my board as a capital
Mhm.
partner.
Mhm.
And so these two worlds started to
Okay.
collide. So I had a passion for private equity, my love for helping YPOers, and by combining the two together, I created Y Capital.
Wow.
And growth equity, by the way, is it's still the private equity asset
Uh-huh.
class, but it's just not doing a buyout. So if I just buy
Very
some
cool.
YPO's company, it's kind of like, okay, well, who
Mhm.
cares? He's going to take the chips off the table and
Mhm.
go have a few
Yes.
margaritas. But if they're really truly looking for growth capital in a traditional
Mhm.
industry, that's what I
Mhm.
focus on. So it's like real estate, construction,
Right.
manufacturing,
Right.
retail, obviously my domain specialties of pharmaceuticals and
Mhm.
healthcare. If we can help them identify a clear line of sight to creating substantial value with the application of advanced technology, then we'll make a minority investment in our
Mhm.
firm. Notably, I will sit on the board to help the YPOer, to help that
Mhm.
CEO reach that new level of growth in their company.
Right.
And that's what it's all
Wow.
about.
And that's like, I want to point that out real quick because it sounds really like the ethical side of private equity, right? Because what is private equity known for? It's almost like just kill off the little guys, right? Like kill off the competition.
Yeah.
But growth equity is actually focused on the real word of it. It's real identity, which is growth. We're not going to buy you out. We make sure you're going to
Right.
grow. It's fantastic. I love that, Eric. I love that there are big leaders like you in that space and Y Capital envisioning that kind of growth and that kind of goals. part of Y Capital's vision is emphasizing making a positive change to society, to the environment through these strategic investments that you guys make. Can you share how you see this going into the future? How do you see growth equity taking over private equity, if that's even possible? And what advice would you give to
No.
entrepreneurs who are trying to get into this space?
Well, so there are two pieces to
Yes.
that. So if you're an entrepreneur trying to get into the space, get out there and be an operator for a
Right.
while.
Right.
That's really
Hmm.
the key. And learn finance. You've got to have a head for the numbers. You've got to be able to analyze and quickly understand um, metrics and the strengths and weaknesses of a company. Where can you add value? What can this industry look like in 5 years? What's the differentiating factor of the
Hmm.
organization? All of that stuff. And there are multiple ways. This isn't. There are multiple roads that you can travel to get into what I'm doing. You can take the old-fashioned
Right.
route, of
Hmm.
course, which is going to a good school, interning over the summer, getting your
Yes.
MBA, and then going into investment banking, and then peeling out and going into venture or private equity. That's the traditional high finance route. That is incredibly viable. You get incredible experience going that
Hmm.
route.
Hmm.
A more difficult route to travel to get into growth equity, private equity, and venture is to do what I'm doing
Okay.
or what I've
Uh-huh.
done, which is spend your life as an
Okay.
entrepreneur in a field that is centered around innovation and primarily
Wow.
technological
Okay. Hmm.
innovation. Like if you become a warehousing entrepreneur, your ability to deploy funds and focus on companies is going to be very, very
Wow.
niche. But if you focus on technology, something as general as technology, and preferably in a type of company where the application of the technology can be broad and you can see a lot of sectors, it would allow you to be able to have a much broader purview of what types of companies you can deploy capital into and help facilitate new stages of growth.
Wow. And Eric, thank you for that advice. And I'm sure our audience and listeners is taking that to heart, especially anyone who is interested in this space. Eric, I want to ask this question as a sort of like putting us together in full circle. What do you see again in the
Mhm.
future of growth equity? But more than that, what are the future aspirations of Mr. Vest himself? Where do you see yourself in the future? Continuing Y Capital, venturing into innovation, or continuing your love and interest, especially in this profound, sector of health and AI. What is the future of Eric Vest?
Well, I have over the years I have very slowly been creating a
Hmm.
checklist of what it is that makes me happy professionally.
Right.
Um, and what I have found, and that's in the early years as the time goes by, it's identifying what is it that I'm good at? How do I think? How does my
Right.
brain work? What do I get the most enjoyment out of doing? Where do I have a passion? And what I have found with Y Capital finally gave me the ability to check off all of the boxes. Because I love, for instance, I'm a very macro level thinker. I feel very at home working with broad based long term
Hmm.
strategy for
Hmm.
companies. And private equity was, I first got a taste of that back in
Uh-huh.
1997 with my second company when I started working in corp dev,
Right. Right.
right? So working with that company, and then 2001 when I formally joined and I was running corp dev. Like that's when I started to realize, and I think it comes down to just keeping a finger on the pulse throughout your entire career about what is it that I enjoy, what am I good at, where am I weak. And if you just kind of put that in the background on warm and constantly have your finger on the pulse of that, that allows you over time to create that
Right.
checklist. And Y Capital gives me the ability to do all
Wow.
of it. There's an altruistic bent. I'm working in the capital markets. I'm working primarily on strategy. I get to utilize technology to create value. I get to travel. I get to meet incredible new people, whether they be operators or they are LPs.
Beautiful.
It's everything that I get to do. And so, being who I am, I'm going to work as hard as I can to grow the firm. But I finally find the opportunity to say, most of the time, a lifestyle company and sort of like a professionally managed company they're mutually exclusive. But what I've found is the opportunity to actually blend those, because I truly am passionate and enjoy what I'm doing with White
Wow.
Capital. So I'm just going to keep on keeping on and continuing to meet new investors to join us in the journey, and continuing to meet new incredible YPOers from around the world to invest in and invest alongside with and help them grow. And I think it's as simple as that. I think it's going to be that's going to be the rest of my journey.
Changing the world, one growth equity investment at a time, with the vision that you guys are carrying at Y Capital. Well, I couldn't describe a more wonderful, fulfilling mission, especially the way you describe that, Eric. It's been I'm quite excited as well with what you guys are going to do in the future. So I would love to give this opportunity, Eric. Tell us where we can find you. Where can we connect with you? Are you on Instagram? Are you on any of the socials? Are you on LinkedIn? But where can we also see the latest of Y Capital? What are their future ventures, and what are the things we can look forward to?
Well, the Y Capital website is probably the easiest way
Mhm.
to do it. It's ycapital.pe. I'm not that big on social. Maybe it's the fact that I'm a Gen
You are a
X,
busy
but
man, of
I'm
course.
sort of relegated to checking birthdays on Facebook. That's about the extent of the social that I do. But we've got it. I'm certainly on LinkedIn, and I'm active on LinkedIn. And then we will keep everybody apprised of our developments and announcing the deals that we're making through both the website and on LinkedIn, and general press releases as well.
Fantastic.
But
Well,
those will be the
I invite everyone to visit Y Capital website, check out what Eric and the team are up to next. But of course, I am now just sending a LinkedIn connection to Eric as well. Eric, we will keep in touch. I would love to know what is the latest with you, and where else can we, look forward to. Eric, it's been great. I always love having experts like you on. It has had really massive success because your insight is so unique. But more than that, I'm also very grateful that there are actually, leaders like you are, who are actually, looking at more than just the profit, more than just wanting to, wanting the numbers. Basically, it's now, I love that there is a common thread that, um, leaders, international thought leaders, are thinking more about the profound effects that they have in society, in people, and the lives that they lead. And Eric, you are one of those, and I am truly honored to have you on here as a guest. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much, Joshua. I appreciate the kind words. It's been an incredibly fun journey so far, and I hope folks got some value out of listening
That's
to it.
fantastic. And of course, we are right there with you. And hopefully, we see big things, and we'll remember Eric best in this episode. And to our audience and listeners out there, thank you for listening, and thank you for tuning in. See you on the next one.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.